Bruh. Wild. Wow. Who that confessional? 079. It's wild. 749. I'm sorry. Numbers are hard. I actually got a text from somebody who used to, y'all see him. I actually had him on the show probably a couple years ago, but he used to work as one of the NFL regional scouts. And he actually shot me a message this morning. Said Michael Thomas gone, Jameis Winston gone, Andres Pete gone. End of an era. End of an era. Shout out to Gabe. Good to see him. And Gabe's one of the people who helped me early in scouting, and he's pretty good. Pretty good dude. He's okay. He's okay. His wife's better than he is, but he's a pretty good dude. So it is the end of an era. For those that have missed it, at least for now, Andres Pete's not re-signing. Michael Thomas has been released and is actually being recruited by Tyreek Hill. What? And yeah, quite a bit going on. And then the only move that New Orleans Saints fans can celebrate is bringing in Nate Peterman. But here's why. Here's why Nate Peterman secretly is the most important signing you didn't know was happening. Here's why. Conspiracy theory time. Come here. We know that Derek Carr has connections to John Gruden. John Gruden loved Derek Carr. However, if you remember, come here, listen. If you remember when Gruden was an analyst, he used to sit down with quarterbacks and talk about strategy. His favorite quarterback was Nate Peterman. We have John Gruden's two favorite quarterbacks. Clearly, John Gruden, with the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Nailed it. Heard it here first. Who dat to you? Welcome in. Love every single one of you. Let's get some who dats to those who are here in the chat early. Mr. Jerry was first. TJ, the moderator, the drama king, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Jimbo Bruno, Louise Schmidt. It's Poppy 504. Popota, fixing to be Rich Pota because we're speaking positivity into his life. James Griffon, the Gundam man himself, says Jake Hayner leads the way. Let's go. Jake Hayner, wow, this is how far Gundam's like. He's really fallen. For those who like to listen and who don't come to live, we get to meet a lot of interesting personalities. My man Gundam went from Jane Daniels to like, Jake Hayner, please save us. Oh, man. Don Juan is here. Saints Garcia, Old Hooper, Rainey, everybody else. Who dat to you? Welcome in. I appreciate that all of y'all are here. And tonight, we're going to have a quick one. Again, having issues with Comcast, my ISP. So this pod might be a little bit shorter, but I do want to know what y'all think about the past couple of moves, what y'all think about where some of these Saints free agents can land. We saw that the man, the myth, the legend, obviously the best Saint of all time, Zach Bond, is with the Philadelphia Eagles, which I think fits really well for them. This is one of those where does bringing in Nate Peterman speak about anything with Jake Hayner? I don't necessarily think it does. I'll be honest. Nate Peterman is a guy that he's the Chase Daniels of the modern NFL. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Nate Peterman has been in the NFL since 2017. This will be his 7th year in the league, and he spent 2 years with all of his previous clubs. He does have some starting experience. He started 5 games, but he's basically been a career backup. That's what he is. He was picked in the 5th round. This will be his 7th year in the league. He was 2 years in Buffalo, 2 years in Vegas, 2 years in Chicago. And he's just a solid, crap hits the fan. He's better than using Juwan Johnson. So we'll see if this actually translates to him seeing the field. There's no guarantee, and it does provide competition with Jake Hayner for that backup spot behind Derek Carr. And this is, of course, not assuming that Gundam does not get his dreams, his wishes, his fantasies of Jaden Daniels coming to the New Orleans Saints. So that's the only real news for Saints fans today. And I think that's fine. Look, if you remember, historically, if anything, the Willie Gay thing is kind of a surprise. Because if you have been a Saints fan for a while, and it's actually kind of great talking in our Discord because we have so many Saints fans who are like 18, 19, 20 years old. We're like, oh, wow, y'all haven't experienced anything. But if you remember, the New Orleans Saints tend to play it real slow. Like, they don't tend to get a lot of free agents until week 2, and sometimes even close to the draft. So to get one on what was essentially day 1 with Willie Gay was very interesting. And this is just how it is. Like, we're going to have to wait it out and see what happens. And while big names sign across the league, earlier today, the Buffalo Bills signed wide receiver Curtis Samuel. I would love that if I'm a Bills fan. I think that's fantastic. I think that's a great move. You look at what the Eagles are doing. Eagles actually brought in Devin White, who I know a lot of Saints fans have talked about. 1 year, $7.5 million, which is over double what Willie Gay's getting paid, FYI. Even more value to the Willie Gay contract, in my personal opinion. Dolphins went and picked up Kendall Fuller on a 2-year deal. So now you got Jalen Ramsey, Fuller. They released Xavier Howard. I mean, you look at what's happening around the league. New Orleans is doing what they typically do. They're playing it pretty slow. Now, the good news is, if you are wanting to see news, well, that Chase Young meeting is tomorrow. Today is Thursday at the time of us recording this show. Well, Thursday, that meeting is going to happen tomorrow. We'll see if it leads to a contract. But New Orleans is doing what New Orleans does. They're taking it slow. I do want to add, I really like the Willie Gay signing, and it was funny. I had somebody message me on Twitter. It's like, hey, Rev, why does it feel like we're just becoming the Raiders, in response to Nate Peterman signing, even though Nate was only there for 2 years, and that was 3 years ago. But I actually feel like New Orleans is trying to become the Kansas City Chiefs. You talk about Honey Badger. You talk about Tano Passignon. You talk about Colin Saunders. All these guys that New Orleans is bringing in. But Willie Gay actually said in his meeting this morning with the media that actually is a big deal, and highlighted how much the Saints, one, had players that he was familiar with, really, kind of like, hey, you got to get over here. But then also talk about the passion of New Orleans and what makes it special. So I love that signing, and I love that being the reason. But still would like to see more movement. I think a lot of y'all would as well. Now, Gundam says Patrick Queen would be a plus. My honest to God thing is, Woody, truthfully, what would Patrick Queen do for this team right now? Honest answer. He's still an undersized linebacker, but he's a good linebacker. I've always liked Patrick Queen. I was higher on him than some people were, looking at you, TJ. He was a second-team All-Pro last year, and I do think that he's gotten better as his careers went on. But my thing is, does he fit Dennis Allen and his system? That said, he has definitely overcome a lot of his issues in terms of, when I say issues, size being the big one. How he's overcome that. Now, the player that I liked more than Patrick Queen is the one that replaced Patrick Queen, which is Roquan Smith, who is also a bit light in the britches, but is a far superior player on the football field, because the mental processing for him is just insane. And Patrick McQueen is like the discount double check version of Roquan Smith. Now, they play technically different positions. Roquan's generally going to play more inside, Patrick McQueen more outside. But if anything, that speaks more to the cerebralness of how amazing Roquan Smith is, because he's one of the rare guys who can be his size. He's 6'1", about 230, 235 on a really good day, and just dominate being a smaller linebacker. The best way I can describe it is Roquan Smith is the modern-day Jonathan Vilma. He's the modern-day Jonathan Vilma. Patrick Queen is a very good player, I would say now. If you make a second-team All-Pro, to me, that turns a lot more heads than Pro Bowl. Great example, Demario Davis, right? Because picking an All-Pro is, there's less people who have an opinion that shouldn't have an opinion. And when I say that, I'm mostly talking about the fact that the fans vote in Pro Bowls and stuff like that. No offense, fans, but I don't watch enough teams to say that. I would trust more people who actually cover the sport to name that. So Demario Davis has had 5 straight All-Pros, 4 of them second team. Well, Patrick Queen just got a second, but there's a big difference between the two. And you look at the style of players, the size of players, if you will, and you see that what New Orleans is currently running is bigger linebackers. Willie Gay is a great example, because he's 6'1", 245, right? Like, he's 15 pounds thicker and heavier, but still has great sideline-to-sideline speed compared to a Patrick Queen. I still think that Queen is good, and obviously the LSU connection would make a lot of people want him to come back here. And I'd be fine with it. I just don't really know if it's needed as much as, hey, defensive line. Like I say, I like what I see as Chase Young being a rotational piece. Like if Chase Young had to be the starter for the Saints, I wouldn't be super happy about him just having to come in and start. But being part of the rotation behind Granderson and Cameron Jordan, I actually think would be a really good fit if they do end up signing him. Because he has good flashes, but he has no consistency. Great flashes. Like you don't get multiple seasons with 7.5 sacks if you don't flash, but it doesn't mean you're consistent. Last year he had 15 QB hits, which is beautiful, but definitely not an elite run defender and definitely not a consistent elite pass rusher. But if he's part of a rotation, it actually fits well, right? So again, New Orleans taking that slow play to get to where they want to go. And I'm very curious about where other New Orleans Saints players are going to end up because, again, like I said, Michael Thomas getting recruited by Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill jumped on Twitter and said, just throwing this out there, Michael Thomas in Miami would be amazing. And he said that about an hour before we went on the air for the podcast. Now, Tyreek Hill is, to me, unarguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. Now, some people might disagree, and feel free to throw out who you believe is the best wide receiver in the NFL, and I will listen to your example. Here's why I believe Tyreek Hill is the best receiver in the NFL, because he just got 1,800 yards. 1,800 yards. You know how many? That's a lot of yards, ladies and gentlemen. That's a lot of yards. 1,800 yards. The man put up over 80 first downs. Oh, he has the penchant for getting into the end zone. He scores a lot of TDs. But what's craziest of all this is that he's done it because he had 13 TDs last year, led the league. He's 5'10", 190. To me, Tyreek Hill is the best wide receiver in the NFL because he's able to do what he does as an undersized player. Like, that's just crazy wild to me. If the best receiver in the NFL today is over here like, yo, Michael Thomas, come on down, could be a good pairing, right? So we'll see where he lands. I'm also curious to see where other Saints land. We've seen the loss of Lonnie Johnson, who went to the Houston Texans. We've seen Zach Bond go to the Eagles, Jameis Winston go to the Browns. And as far as, we also Malcolm Roach go to the Denver Broncos. Chase Young visiting tomorrow, but then we've also officially released Marcus May now. So that official release is now no longer counting against the cap. We restructured yesterday Ryan Ramczyk's deal, which gave us $14 million more for the cap. Where New Orleans, as of I think yesterday, were around $16 million in cap space. And then you also have Jimmy Graham, Andres Pete, Michael Thomas are set, and they're complete free agents now. And a former New Orleans Saints, almost said wide receiver, but corner Isaac Yiadom, who I actually like and want them to bring back, is currently visiting with the Washington Commanders. There's no other really news. And I would say that some of these, like, you could call them role players, I would like to see... Personally, I would like to see more attention given to some of these guys. Personally. Now, I want to grab chat real quick, see what chat says. Gunham says, worried about Chase Young, he takes off plays. And while I agree, here's why that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me if he's not the starter. Because if he's taking plays off as a rotational guy, it's easy. Yank him. But if a guy's trying to play for snaps, and maybe that's what he needs, because Chase Young came into the league almost heralded in a way a lot of other big name guys is this dude's going to be a stud. Give him all the snaps. Let him go after it. Like he's going to come in and rock things day one. And he didn't. I mean, he did okay his rookie year. Then he had 2 years where didn't really get to play the seasons. So yeah, that might be a thing. But now he is obviously not seen the same way. If he's having to fight for snaps, hopefully that's not a problem. And if you're adding him in as a rotational player, which what New Orleans would be doing, it's a win-win for New Orleans. Because the worst thing that happens is you sign a guy on a low, rotational contract who doesn't pan out. Best thing that happens is that fire gets ignited and he decides, oh, I really should, figure this out. And he balls out. So either way, it's a win-win if they can get him to come here. But the thing is, there might be other teams that offer him a legitimate starting spot. And that makes it really difficult to, obviously it makes it very difficult to get him to come here if somebody says, hey, we're just going to make you the full-time starter. So when I look at this, I look at it as a fantastic possibility. I'm just curious if it's actually going to happen. But the reason I'm okay with it because, well, like I said, he's not going to be the starter here. Cameron Jordan will be the starter. He'd be the rotational guy. And maybe he can have, this pop off in his second stint and be good. We'll see. How similar is Young's career path to Clowney? It's an interesting comparison. The difference, I would say, is Jadeveon Clowney, I know he's listed as a defensive end, but he's basically played a stand-up two-point guy his entire career for the most part. And I would say that if you told me right now I could have Houston Jadeveon Clowney as part of my rotation on the defensive line, I would take that in a heartbeat if that's what Chase Young is, right? Because what New Orleans needs is youthful talent, especially talent that can, hopefully grow and play better. I think that'd be great. The big thing with Chase Young is he going to provide the effort and is he healthy? And if he is, that is something that New Orleans should make in my opinion, a strong effort to bring to this team. He's young. He's coming off injuries, so hopefully that means that the cost is lower. And he has stellar potential. I mean, there's a reason this guy was the second overall pick, right? And he did make a Pro Bowler. He was the defensive rookie of the year, 2020. So I would personally love to see him in a Saints uniform. And Gunn then asked, will we see somewhat of a resurgence of Cameron Jordan? Not being sarcastic, but for real. If Cam is fully healthy, I think you'll see Cam return to being a 5 to 7 sack guy. I think personally Cam's days of being a 10 sack player are done. That's okay. He's gotten older. This happens. I'm not even saying it in a hater way. I'm just saying it in a factual way. Those are probably done. But I also think that's okay, right? I think it's okay to have that guy be a solid, 1-2 down guy. And then have other guys like a Chase Young come in the rotation to be your pass rushers. That doesn't mean you can't even keep Cam on the field. Like if you want to run a NASCAR package, I think Cameron Jordan should be part of your NASCAR package, rushing the passer. But yeah, I think that you could see that because he did play through significant injury. How much that affected him? Well, we'll never really be able to know that. We'll always have that as like a conjecture moment, but it affected him. So if he's healthy, I do think you see that come back a little bit more. I just don't know how much. And I'm not going to claim it's going to be a lot, Tennessee had a good D-line last year. This is factual. And New Orleans needs to get back to having a good D-line. Kofi says, if we can't get Chase on a 1 year, maybe around $8 million, don't talk to him. Let him go to Tennessee. As long as he doesn't go to somewhere in the division. Now, we do know that there are other teams that are looking at him. For example, Carolina Panthers could certainly use a defensive end since they got rid of Burns, right? They traded Burns away. So they're going to need a pass rush. And if you're one of those that doesn't like Chase Young, well, then maybe you hope he goes to Carolina. Trevor says, I don't know if Deuce has seen this, but a report came out from Who Dat Nation about Jarvis Landry exposing how DA didn't give Jameis a fair shot. Now, I've not seen that. But at the same time, I've kind of said that for years. I haven't seen him say that. I'll Google it real quick and see what comes up. And I don't see anything. But yeah. But I've not seen that. Where did the report come out? But personally, I've thought that. You made a guy play with a broken back. He didn't perform well, and then he lost his job. Which we've talked about this a lot, and he's talked about it. He being Winston. He said it himself. This has always been a league where You do not lose your job due to injury. Well, he did, right or wrong. Now, if you don't like Jameis Winston, like you don't believe that he was a good player, cool. Then you wanted him to lose his job. But it's still an understood thing where you don't lose your job due to injury. That's the thing. I do think for multiple reasons, DA never gave him a fair shake, but it is what it is. Winston was never DA's guy. We know who DA's guy is. He went and got him. Right? He went and got him. I do really hope the best for Winston and Cleveland. I even said this in the last episode. I want Watson to not play so that Jameis can come in and dominate. I truly do. I really do. The Watson addition has been an absolutely abysmal experiment so far for Cleveland. And I realize that it hasn't been that long. It's only been 2 years. But in 2 years, he has played 12 games. In 2 years, he's thrown 14 touchdowns to 9 interceptions in 12 games. That is worse than Derek Carr numbers. His QB rating is 81. I will acknowledge that they were a better looking team because they did start off like 5-1 last year with Watson. But so far, it's not working out. And he's definitely not playing full games. The man's making buku money. And again, a lot of Saints fans love to hate on Carr. And that's completely fine to dislike Carr. But damn, if you want to be pissed at a guy who in 12 games has thrown 14 touchdowns. That's not good for a guy getting paid like he's getting paid. Right? So here we are in the midst of free agency. His contract, by the way, with Cleveland, 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed, all of it. Why even play? Why bother? Who cares? $230 guaranteed. Shout out Jameis Winston. I hope he's successful in Cleveland. I think he'll have opportunity. I really struggle to not see Winston getting starts in Cleveland. Really struggle to see that. 230 guarantee million, that's insane. Yeah, well, I don't know if you remember Gunham, but it was a big drama because his whole contract was guaranteed. With Kirk Cousins being in the division, the resurgence of the Bucs, I feel like the Saints might be behind the 8 ball simply because of coaching and talent, but I guess we'll see. I think there's no way to know in March, but I do think you're right. In fact, I complimented what the Falcons did Tuesday. And here's what I compliment. I compliment bringing in Zach Robinson at offensive coordinator. I think that you have given Kirk Cousins the most weapons he's had in years. Now, I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins hasn't had weapons in Minnesota, right? Hard to say you don't have weapons when you have Justin Jefferson. But I would argue that Cousins has not had a plethora of weapons in a couple years. You can still have Justin Jefferson and he'd be amazing while simultaneously making the argument that there were years where there was more talent for Kirk Cousins to work with, right? I always feel like I got to add context. Justin Jefferson is an amazing player because in 9 games last year, because he wasn't even there the whole season, remember? 9 games, he was a 1,000-yard receiver. That's nuts. 10 games, 1,000-yard receiver. That's nuts. But like you go back just a couple years for Kirk Cousins, and when they had Dalvin Cook and had Justin Jefferson and had Adam Thielen, who was 31 but was still playing at a high level because in 2021, Adam Thielen had 10 receiving touchdowns, right? And that's when they still had Alexander Madison. He was a young player. Alexander Madison was. So you look back at some of those years, then you're talking about like, whoa, okay, now they really had some talent for Kirk Cousins. And they don't have that now. So Kirk Cousins is going into a situation where he's got Drake London, who I feel like is a good wide receiver. Chris Olave better, but still good. Kyle Pitts, Algier, John Robinson, a revamped offensive line. Like, honest to God, Atlanta's offense is the scariest offense on paper March 14th, 2024. Like, as of March 14th, 2024, they have the scariest offense on paper to me. Now, will that all connect and actually work? I don't know. But I believe that they have got the weapons, They've worked on their offensive line, and they went and got an offensive coordinator that we wanted, so I'm not going to trash talk him. I think Zach Robinson is a good OC. I do not believe in Raheem Morris as a head coach, but I got the same problem down here in New Orleans, and that team has got a ton of talent on offense. So we'll see how it plays out. The only real separator for me is the fact that DA is a far better defensive coach than Raheem Morris. That's just, I'll stand on that hill and die on it all day long. DA is a way better defensive coach. So Falcons are putting together some moves. I give them respect. I still want to beat them twice, but I give them respect for what they're doing. New Orleans has to be able to match that same energy. I think that Clint Kubiak helps match that energy. But New Orleans also has to find another stud wide receiver. They do. I do absolutely want A.T. Perry to be successful, but you can't just bank on that. Juwan Johnson cannot have the surprisingly down season he did last year. Juwan Johnson needs to come in this year and show people what we thought he would be. It's wild because Juwan Johnson last year, less yards, less TDs than 2022. He didn't look like himself, especially after that injury. So you talk about Cameron Jordan needing to come back and look healthier. Juwan Johnson needs to come back and pop off. Like if Juwan Johnson has less than 700 yards receiving this upcoming season and less than 17 Ds, it's a disappointment. And he'll be 28 this year. So if he's going to pop off and be this, developed guy, he's got to do it now. But being healthy hopefully does that. We'll see. We'll see. Paul says Dennis Allen will be fired by midseason. The only way I foresee that happening is if the New Orleans Saints by midseason, let's say 8 games, are anywhere from 1-7 to 3-5. That's the only way. And 3-5 is pushing it. 3-5 is pushing it. But that's the only way DA gets fired. It's the only way. And love him or hate him, with most of us being the latter, DA, I've said this before, DA's got one of the safest jobs in the league right now because Mickey Loomis believes in him. And I don't know if there's a general manager with a safer job than Mickey Loomis. Now, I know I'm sounding a lot like a hater right now. I'm just speaking facts. I don't know of a GM with a safer job than Mickey Loomis. And Mickey Loomis currently believes in DA. So it's really tough for me to imagine DA getting fired without there being an extreme. Now, the good news is Mickey Loomis, on paper, has brought in somebody who could be the future should DA suck. Clint Kubiak's that guy. Clint Kubiak is a guy who is gunning to become a head coach. And remember, good offensive coordinators do not stay offensive coordinators. Good offensive coordinators become head coaches. That's what the NFL has been doing for 20 years now. About 30 years, consistently. Every good offensive coordinator is a good offensive coordinator for like a super small amount of time, and then they become a head coach. So, in a sense, there's a little bit of a fire back there, a little bit of competition back there for Dennis Allen. But it would take something extreme to get him fired. Something extreme. Now, I'm not even saying I don't want it to happen. I'm just saying that Clint Kubiak is just as likely to be the Saints' next head coach as anybody in the league. And I really believe that. A little bit of a paradigm shift because I do want to acknowledge our comments because the comments are what make this show special. Gundam says Isaiah Foskey is the key. He needs to step up and seize his destiny as a dog. Gundam, let me say something about you real quick. You need to stop watching so much anime, stop watching so much hentai, and stop reading so much manga. Because every time you come in my chat, you come in with a phrase that feels like it's inside of a text bubble in black and white. Sir, I love you, but what are you talking about really? He is the key with a literal key emote. This man, what are you talking about that he needs to seize his destiny? Are you saying that God was up there in the heavenly clouds in the seventh heaven, sitting there going, Isaiah Foskey, year 2, 19 sacks? Like what do you think? What is going on in your Gundam brain right now, sir? Please put down the animated images, put away the waifu pillar, and go touch some grass. Please. Man said, seize his destiny. He's a dog. Oh, my God. Okay. Love all of y'all. I like Kubiak as a Saints head coach. Potential is great, Paul Parker. But potential only gets you so far. Dennis Allen had potential. Marcus Davenport has some of the most potential of a defensive end I've ever seen. Potential only goes so far. You got to put it out on the field. Touch grass or smoke grass. I like to put my grass into an edible form and ingest it. So I ingest my grass. I don't know what y'all do. Y'all are probably laughing because we have fun over here. But yeah, when the world needed him most, head ass. Exactly. You know, Gundam's the type of dude who not only watches the anime that we watch, Gundam be watching the animes like where they're doing like real life stuff. Like it's just an anime of people in high school dating and doing their math homework. Like that's the type of Gundam probably can name. You know how when they'll make an anime and they'll bring it over here to us Americans and they'll put it in a regular American title? Gundam over here saying the same anime but using the Japanese name. Like if you don't shut your and watch the show like everybody else, sub over dub looking at. Anyway, Deuce, I just don't trust that DA and Carr can get us to the playoffs and consistently win. Just can't trust them if DA can focus just on defense and Clint was in full control. I completely understand where you're coming from there, Ko-Fi. Here's the thing. Dennis Allen ain't going to stay if you fire him as a head coach. You're not going to be like, hey, DA, look, man, you do great things. We just need you to step down to defensive coordinator real quick. That's not going to happen. That said, I do agree with you that he is best as a defensive coach. And if he can delegate enough of the offense, you can have success there. Look at other guys around the league who are defensive-minded guys who continue to have success because they delegate offensive duties to the person who is more qualified or better at it. You know, Mike Tomlin's not an offensive guy. I don't know if y'all know this. Mike Tomlin, that's not an offensive man. He's not an offensive man. In fact, he's a pretty nice man. Can be a little intimidating at times, I guess, if you look at him, but he's a good guy. We like him. But that was a DB coach and a defensive coordinator. But he's been the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach since 2009 because he delegates that offense to more qualified folks. And that's what DA has to do. Because I do believe that Derek Carr as a quarterback is talented enough to be on a team that goes to the playoffs. That doesn't mean I believe he's talented enough to single-handedly take a team to the playoffs. But I do believe that he's good enough to where he doesn't cost you the playoffs, right? He's like a neutral. He's mid-tier. I believe that DA, if he delegates and allows them to find the offense that they need to find, like he's not trying to do a Sean Payton and tell defensive guys to blitz. He doesn't need to come over here and start telling Derek Carr to run flea flickers. As long as he stays on his side of the bench and does his job and Clint Kubiak is what we hope, I do believe this team can make the playoffs. Right? We'll see how it pans out. You're exactly right. Also, Gundam, I love you, appreciate you. Thank you for letting me goof off with you. Don says Nate Peterman is not an NFL caliber quarterback, not even as a backup. Jake Hayner will beat him out. Bold statement for a man who's been at the league 6 years with 3 different teams, 2 years each. Clearly, he's got a little bit of quality as a backup, even if he's not necessarily a good player. But because you said that, let's take a look at the stats. Because the only way to properly judge a player is by the stat sheet that they have, and there's no other way that we can objectively say one is better than the other. So, how shall we do this? Well, first, we shall give you the stats of the Peterman. So, he's not Peterbilt, he's Peterman, and he has, so far, thrown 4 touchdowns for 13 interceptions, 53% completion percentage, 700 yards. Now, you might think that's bad. You look at that and go, wow, that actually seems historically awful. But hold on. Wait a minute. What if it wasn't? What if there was a time where there was a player who did worse? And believe it or not, by golly, there was. Here's an example. Have you ever heard of the name Y.A. Tittle? He's in the Hall of Fame now. He's in the Hall of Fame. Would you like to know what he did in 1950? He threw 8 touchdowns and 19 interceptions. That's a Hall of Famer, ladies and gentlemen. Have you ever heard of Joe Geary? All-Pro, two-time Pro Bowler, same year, 6 TDs, 15 interceptions. So there could be a potential there. You just got to be able to see it. How do y'all think I did? Did I do my best Mickey Loomis impersonation? Do you feel the Mickey Loomis? Did I do a good Mickey Loomis there? You know, with the whole Hall of Famers and D8. Okay. Hopefully some of y'all got it. Most of y'all are like, what is this man talking about? That's a very specific reference. Got to be chewing gum. Yeah, I didn't have any gum on me, J. Rod. I didn't have any gum on me. But yeah. Look, Nate Peterman is what he is. I would actually love Jake Haener to be the number 2 because I know you shouldn't think this way, but I do think this way because I'm human. And if Jake Haener does not start football games, you wasted a 4th round pick. That's how my brain works. If he does not start and play football, you wasted a pick. So I'd need him to be the backup, and I need him to be developed into a starter. Hemi says, what? DA is a Hall of Fame head coach? Hemi, you did not watch one of the most amazing interviews ever. And that was when Mickey Loomis came out and was rattling off Bill Belichick and all these other dudes who are Hall of Fame coaches and like, hey, it took a couple years to get going. We believe DA can do the same thing, just smacking gum as loud as possible. Man, talking about some Jimmy Johnsons and, Belichick's. I'm like, well, Mickey. And here's what actually happened, y'all. When David Onyemata moved, y'all don't know this. This is an insider story. But when David Onyemata moved, Mickey Loomis actually bought David Onyemata's house. And when they opened the walls of David Onyemata's house, they found in 80-gram sections and 80-gram bags just top over top over top of THC. And since David Onyemata left, Mickey Loomis has just been smoking inside David Onyemata's old house. So when he gave that speech, he was high as a songbird. This man was freaking cumulus clouding himself through his whole monologue about DA being a potential head coach of the Hall of Fame. And that's just what happened. It's okay. Shout out to 80 grams. We love him. Also, off season, I'm allowed to get a little bit more off season content. I hope y'all have a good time. If you're not smiling, well, you should probably smile. It's better for your face. It's healthier. Also, David Onyemata. You didn't like us when you were here, and now you're in Atlanta. Fuck you. It was obvious what the new offensive staff would bring players, worked with Peterman, so not a surprise. I can see that, NTR. I really don't worry about the Nate Peterman signing. It's not much of a signing to me. It's just a whatever thing. I'm not going to like get up and crazy about Nate Peterman, and I'm certainly not going to, make any type of projections about what he can contribute or be. I think it's a signing you make in March that by the time we get around to August, September, we probably won't be talking about it. And I'm going to also say rabbit trailing while I'm trying to entertain the 100 people here. I personally believe our off-season episodes are more fun than our in-season episodes because I have more opportunity to be goofy with y'all. But maybe that's just me. I'd rather he not step foot in the building, but it ain't like he's taking Derek's job. All right, now TJ's just trying to take food out of people's mouth because he's petty. Why do you not want him to even come into the building? Why? Don says, I'd be cool with grabbing Renfro more so than Landry. First off, don't touch him. That's assault. Second off, if they bring in Renfro, I'm not going to have an issue with that. Not right. He's not like one that just go, wow, amazing addition. But absolutely no issue if the Saints want to pick up Hunter Renfro since he's now been released. Now, here's the thing. Jimmy Garoppolo also got released. Hunter Renfro doesn't fit the current spot that's open for New Orleans, which is that starter split in position. Now, I guess you could put him there if you wanted to, but he's 5'10", 185. He's really a slot guy. I know he had a 1,000-yard season and everything, but I have no issue with them bringing in Hunter Renfro. Absolutely no issue with it. But I still feel like even if the New Orleans Saints do go after Hunter Renfrow, they have still got to address the wide receiver position. Still have to. And I think that A.T. Perry, again, I've said I want him to have that opportunity to take that spot at split end, but you definitely can't bank a starting position off a guy who played essentially 3 starts. So there are multiple options to go here. I don't think there's a wrong answer. And in fact, I would actually love to draft a guy in about the 4th or 5th round at wide receiver. And I would like to bring in a veteran and see what happens. Put multiple options on the field and then let it duke it out in training camp. And that way you really know. That way you really know. Seems that signing says more about Jake Haener. I honestly don't think it says anything about Jake Haener. Here's why. The New Orleans Saints have always been a team that signs a lot of veteran backup quarterbacks, but that doesn't mean they keep them. Now, it's easy to forget about these things because it's been so long. But let me take y'all back in the way, way back machine. And if you go back in the way, way, way back machine, you remember that the New Orleans Saints used to do these really cool things called quarterback competitions. If you remember, in these quarterback competitions were people that you never heard of or have yet to have heard of since. Back in the QB competition days, like Ryan Nassib would be winning QB competitions, and Garrett Grayson and Chase Daniels. You might know Chase Daniels, but how many people remember Ryan Nassib? Sometimes that's just what you're doing when you sign a backup quarterback, especially in March. There's no guarantee he's actually going to be on the roster that next year. You bring in a guy, he's a guy, it's whatever. And New Orleans used to do this all the time. They just brought in veteran quarterbacks. You'd have 4 or 5 of them in camp, and basically none of them lasted or did anything, and that was it. So we'll see what happens with Peterman. He may not even make the roster, and it's one of those that, and this is semi-insulting, not meaning to be insulting, but it's one of those times that when that signing happens, they don't even put out like financial data about it. Like, no, it's not even that important. It's not even that important. Like, nobody cares. Now, breaking news, former Dolphins wide receiver Cedric Wilson has just agreed to sign with the New Orleans Saints on a 2-year deal. Cedric Wilson, 6'2", 200, does fit that prototype, but he is not a big name guy that maybe many of you are going to recognize. He did have 1 year in Dallas where he got pretty semi-significant time, but bringing him in is going to help that position that we're literally just talking about. So they just signed Cedric Wilson. Again, it's going to be a very cheap deal. This is a guy who's been in the league 5 years, still semi-young, but he is never been a starter, but has been a rotational guy. And there we go. There you go. So there's you a signing in the middle of the night of an option. And I still don't even think this would take them out of a Hunter Renfrow style setting. But Cedric Wilson, Miami Dolphins, we'll see what he can be. Now, don't confuse Cedric Wilson with, there's actually 2 Cedric Wilsons in the league right now who play wide receiver, just an FYI. You want to go with the I think that there might be one. But anyway, you want to go with the one with Miami. I think there was one that was on a practice squad. I just happen to remember his name. Anyway, this is a former 6th round pick. Former 6th round pick. There you go. 2 years. I like the signing. Now, we have to do some film study on him, but I like the signing. He seemed to be ascending with Dallas. Remember, 2021, he played 16 games, had 45 receptions for 600 yards and 6 TDs. And then after this rookie deal or whatever, he went to Miami. Miami just barely seemed to have used him. In Miami, he only had 34 receptions for 400 yards. So he is a young, he's 28, he'll turn 29 this year, rotational guy, and we'll see if he contributes. It's a depth signing. It's exactly what it is. Remember, Slime, you have 90 spots, 90 roster spots, 90 of them bad boys. 90 roster spots to fill in. So, yeah, I got zero issue with this one, and they are, sad to say, hitting up that bargain bin right now. Hmm. All right, we're going to turn 29. Shouldn't. It says his birthday is in November. But we're going to wrap up. I can't wait for the next edition of this pod. We're going to wrap up. Hope you had a good time. Join the Discord if you haven't already. We might have to do a special edition episode this weekend if a big signing happens. I will let y'all know, obviously, ahead of time. But I am excited about some of the moves they're making. If the Chase Young thing turns into something, then we will do a special episode. But who dat to you? God bless. This episode a little bit shorter because we did have or are having ISP issues. But appreciate every single one of you. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Who dat? God bless. Catch you on the next one. Deuces. That's me. Love every single one of you. Hope you had a smile and enjoyed tonight.